holiday cheer. Speaking of this season that, for many around the world spells giving, spells hope, it was additionally marred here in Israel and the West Bank in the wake of a wave of a right-wing incitement campaign. And incitement seems to be the leading word when it comes to what's been going on in the Middle East over the course of the last several months. The right-wing incitement campaign in support of a Jewish terror group suspected in leading the murderous attack on the Dawabshe family in the Palestinian village of Duma. Now, that was an attack that happened in July where a Palestinian family was burned alive, 3 members killed, including a baby. Now, that attack was supposedly perpetrated by Jewish extremists. It's been called and deemed Jewish terror across the administration of the Israeli parliament. Security agencies, the Shabak in Israel, though, have come under a lot of scrutiny over the course of the last week for actually getting a confession from one of the suspects, the Jewish suspects in their holding, and right-wing factions are claiming that the security services in Israel are using way too much force. That said, also throughout that debate in Israel, a video was released. A video was leaked, one may say, and people are arguing that it may have been leaked by the security services, of a wedding taking place in an Israeli right-wing, one would say, ambiance. It's a wedding that shows a lot of Israeli right-wing supporters holding guns up. They were stabbing pictures of a Palestinian baby, that same baby that was killed in that attack in July. So incitement goes both ways, so it seems, and that video has created a lot of debate in Israel. So far, Netanyahu's government has managed to avoid public pressure on these volatile issues, but many Israelis from both sides of the political map are starting to ask themselves, where do we go from here? Let's watch a report about that video released about incitement, break it down from there.
The Jewish people have always had many enemies, but history shows that none managed to cause as much harm as intra-Jewish conflicts, a seemingly never-ending fraternal war. On Wednesday night, a growing rift within modern Israeli society burst into the headlines and stayed there. This wedding footage, broadcast by Israel's Channel 10, shows right-wing extremists celebrating July's killing of the Palestinian Dawabshe family. Dozens of guests danced while waving knives and rifles. Others mock-stabbed a picture of 18-month-old Ali Dawabshe, who was murdered along with his parents in the arson attack in Duma, believed to be carried out by ultranationalist Jews. Judaism has a very long heritage of extremism. During the Roman Empire, the Jewish Sicarii were the zealots. The name derives from Latin and describes their use of daggers to attack Romans and their supporters. The Sicarii are best known for their mass suicide in Masada, 3 years after the destruction of the biblical temple in Jerusalem. The most influential extremist of modern times was Rabbi Meir Kahane, whose Koch movement was banned as a political party in Israel in 1988. Kahane himself was assassinated by a Muslim in Manhattan in November 1990. His radical vision, however, inspired others and outlived him.
I want to throw all the Arabs out of Israel. Out, out, out.
A great example is the Jewish underground, which killed multiple Arabs and plotted to assassinate Palestinian mayors and blow up the Dome of the Rock Mosque in Jerusalem's Flashpoint Temple Mount compound. In 1994, Baruch Goldstein killed 29 Palestinians at the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. 1 year later, Yigal Amir assassinated then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. In the 21st century, Jewish radicalism has found its expression in so-called price tag attacks, namely carried out against Palestinians by young hardline settlers.
There's no room for forgiveness. This is my land. We have nothing to do with the Arabs here. They are welcome to go to France or Germany. I heard they're seeking for many Muslims there these days.
After decades of feeling marginalized, the Israeli right today controls the government. With this power comes great responsibility, not only to preach tolerance towards the Palestinians, but also to bridge the divide between right and left, as well as defining right from wrong.
2, 1, here we go. I'm still joined in studio by Haaretz senior defense correspondent, analyst Amir Owen. Good morning to you. Also with me, right-wing activist Eitan Mayersdorf of the Im Tirtzu group, and of course, I-24 News contributor Army Kaufman. Thank you for being with us. I want to You know what, I'm going to start with you, Mayor, because have you seen that video? I'm sure you've seen that video of the wedding. And I'm sure Im Tirtzu will want to distance itself from that kind of behavior, correct? Okay. Do we not think, though, that there is a problem with the right-wing extreme faction in Israel that doesn't just dance and stab pictures of small babies, but actually also goes out and burns them down?
Of course there's a problem. There's a problem with any extremist faction, whether on the left or the right. And of course any rational person would definitely distance themselves, like Im Tirtzu. And I hardly know any people, I don't know any people that would actually condone this kind of behavior. But what it's important to note is that I see on this report that it was saying right wing, right wing. Of course they are on the right, but I think it's important to make the distinction between right wing and extreme right wing. Let's say after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, what was done, it was kind of, I don't want to say libel, it was kind of what was done against the right wing was saying all right wing people now, whoever supports the right wing government, therefore supports this kind of behavior, which is very far from the truth. So I think it's very important to distinguish between radical extremists and people, let's say like me, that would support a right wing government and are not in favor of all these things.
Not in favor of all these things, but also hold a campaign, and I'm talking about incitement now, which seems to be the leading word, not just on the Palestinian side, but also on the Israeli side. Speaking of incitement, there is a video also that came out approximately, I think it was last week, that calls upon Israelis to look out for people who are so-called embedded within us. We have this video, and I need us to watch it first because we're going to talk about incitement. Let's take a look at it.
לפני שהמחבל הבא דוקר אותך, הוא כבר יודע שישי מנוחין, שתול של הולנד, ידאג להגן עליו מפני חקירה של השב"כ. המחבל גם יודע שאבנר גבריהו, שתול של גרמניה, יקרא לחייל שינסה לסכל את הפיגוע פושע מלחמה. הוא גם יודע שסיגי בן ארי, שתולה של ממשלת נורווגיה, תגן עליו בבית המשפט. לפני שהמחבל הבא דוקר אותך, הוא כבר יודע שחגי אלעד, שתול של האיחוד האירופי, יקרא לישראל פושעת מלחמה. חגי, ישי, אבנר וסיגי הם ישראלים. הם גרים כאן איתנו והם שתולים. כשאנחנו...
People would argue that this is incitement, that this is pinpointing specific people from the left and putting them as collaborators with stabbers.
Well, first, again, I want to make a distinction between the left and the radical left. And it's important to understand the context of this video. This video is in context of a report, the Foreign Agents Report published by Im Tirtzu, that examines 20 NGOs, Israeli NGOs, that receive foreign funding from European governments and pretty much from European entities, and exposes exactly what they do with this money. Now, people call it incitement. I personally don't see it like this. I see a fact there are Israelis getting stabbed, and these people do receive foreign funding, and they do take this funding and actively campaign, whether it is the Israeli Supreme Court or Israeli institutions, in favor of these terrorists. Now, I'm not saying that they support terror, but what they do is that they bolster the terrorism.
That video, though, purports to show them supporting terror entirely.
No. Again, I disagree. There's a difference between supporting terror and bolstering terrorism by not allowing the IDF to freely act. Now, when you go around the world slandering Israel, and therefore what happens when Israel, the next IDF operation, they have to take into account, wait a second, if I do this, it's very possible that the international community is going to condemn sanctions, whatever you want on us, and therefore it hampers our ability, the IDF's ability to protect the citizens because of these actions. So why, of course, if you ask any of these individuals, they're not going to say that they're in favor of terror. Of course not, and that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that their activities...
But in that video, and hold on, before I say that, in that video, I would argue and say that when you see somebody with a big knife, okay, and you immediately after that cut to the picture of an Israeli, visually, in the age that we're living in, that connects them to terror. But Amir, you wanted to say something.
Yes. Obviously, this is guilt by association, and not just any guilt, but, and you used the word embedded. It's too light a word. It's implanted, it's sleeper cells. These are people who are allegedly being sent as moles by foreign entities to act within Israeli societies in order to help its enemies. Now, the comparison being made here between right-wing, left-wing, extreme radical, these groups are acting via democratic means. On the other side, they are absolutist. The problem is not being extremist, but absolutist, and the end justifies the means that they're using. If they need to massacre those 29 Palestinians in the Cave of the Patriarchs, if they need to assassinate an Israeli prime minister, so be it. Because the end is that there is going to be a Jews-only country, Jewish-only state in the Holy Land, and all the rest is immaterial. If one has to kill for it, if one has to deport millions of Palestinians, this is a small price to pay in order to achieve this goal. So there really is no comparison between the two extremes of Israeli societies, and the NGOs are not extreme at all. They are acting democratically in order to inform the public, both here and abroad, regarding what is happening. They are not hampering the IDF. The IDF is actually being helped by their reports in order to clean its house.
In order to clean its house. There is a debate about this, although throughout the Israeli society right now, and that's one of the reasons we're dealing it. It's completely evident in the opinion pages of this morning, Ami Kaufman, that you brought to us.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's creating waves. I have to say, the video of the wedding, to me, was terrifying. Okay, terrifying. That we have groups like that, and I don't think that it's a minority anymore. I think that actually there's quite a few of them to stab pictures of little babies. But you know what? It's out there. It's out there, and one needs to deal with it also from within. What do the Israeli newspapers say?
As you said, first of all, the op-ed page is just full of opinions, a lot of condemnation, of course. Most of them really condemning and outraged. What I'm surprised, by the way, is that people are surprised. I don't think it's that surprising that we're seeing videos like this. We've seen videos very similar of weddings like this in the past couple of years, by the way. And you can just look at it on YouTube. So this is not totally surprising to me. It's horrifying. Yeah. Surprising. Let's talk about David Horovitz, the editor of the Times of Israel, who is a very emotional op-ed talking about how he is outraged and surprised, but a little glimpse of hope, saying that it is not too late for the state of Israel to reassert its insistence on upholding the core Jewish values that these young people have lost, and chiefly, of course, the fundamental respect for the divine gift of human life. He's also saying that we have to put more into education and educating these people in the West Bank and settlers, and again, making things a bit more humane there. Asher Schechter of Haaretz gives us, I guess, the classic, it's all the occupation.
Right.
It's all about the occupation. And let's just read one paragraph from here. In the early 1980s, the Israeli philosopher Yael Lavie coined the highly controversial term Judeo-Nazis to describe Israel's conduct during the First Lebanon War and Israel's mounting militarization. But that was then. The footage of extremists now celebrating the cold-blooded murder of an innocent toddler begs a more up-to-date term for this sort of bloodlust motivated by religious fanaticism, Judeo-ISIS. Perhaps.
Judeo-ISIS, yeah.
Between nuts and Nazis. Somewhere on this.
I mean, and I think that's, to me, that, in my opinion, I think that's a little bit also out there. But when we're speaking sometimes about education, and I want to ask you, because we also have Mossi Raz from Meretz on the phone with us. Isn't it a fact, okay, be it on the left or on the right, if we're hearing this, this incitement or people calling names or saying that not embedded or implanted, or this is too extreme or this is that it's the time for education and not to point fingers? And not to point fingers at, from within our society?
Well, again, I'm sorry. I first want to just quickly backtrack and comment on 2 points that Amir made. One about the democracy. It's definitely not democratic to, instead of going through the diplomatic channels from the European governments through Israel, to go to the back door, get donations, then try to implement their policies through that way.
Does the receive any foreign funding?
Foreign funding from governments? Absolutely not.
From foreign people?
Of course,
from
but there's a big difference between individual donors, meaning my relative could give me money to campaign for any party I want, but if all of a sudden the Congress gives me money to campaign, that's a different story.
Someone who resides outside of Israel, and again, what right does he have to meddle in our affairs?
It's not meddling in our affairs. It's giving me money to act as I wish. Again, there's
this is meddling in our affairs.
No,
it's a person from a different country.
Is it not my right to get money from him?
Right.
To act as I want. But when a different government, we have diplomatic relations with another government, and they're trying to circumvent that process to affect our democratic society. That's a big difference, and that's a huge distinction that it seems that in this past campaign is being lost. People just either they are unaware or they claim to be unaware.
There are American Jewish millionaires funding settling activities, and these settling activities are hampering the peace process and are getting Israelis killed. Is that the right thing to do?
Okay, a huge report that $220 million have been given tax exempt. there's an incentive for Americans to give money to right-wing organizations in Israel. Is that not meddling in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Again,
is that not interference?
One second. That's up for debate, okay? Wait,
the money is documented. What's up for debate?
Listen. Meddling is one thing. Is it their right? I believe that it's a right for any individual citizen to donate however they want. However, it's not right for Sweden, for Denmark, to start giving money to these organizations in order to advance their values in Israel. That's
but
a
the
big,
U.S.
big
is giving
difference.
tax breaks to Americans. That is the same thing as a government. Like you're saying,
and that's fine. Did I argue? So go to the U.S. and have your.
So you go to the European government and do the same thing.
That's exactly what we're doing. Exactly what this campaign is doing. We're exposing just.
So
we want the public to know.
money. The Inter also gets the exact kind of thing.
Absolutely not. Again,
you see the hypocrisy?
Do you see the hypocrisy that I'm trying to explain? Sorry for raising my tone. To understand the difference between a foreign entity.
What they're doing is evil.
No, what they're doing is from a government, and what we're doing is getting money from private donors. There's a huge difference between that.
And I think I think we just showed an example. Here's the thing, everybody's going to have their opinion on who gets the money from where. But I'm asking you again, when it comes, okay, when we're looking at this video, when it comes to pinpointing specific people, okay, and connecting them with terror, with Palestinian terror, doesn't that hamper the point of education, of trying to get together and not pointing fingers within a society?
I don't think so. Meaning not pointing fingers. Sometimes you have to point fingers in order to expose the truth. We want people to know what's going on. Now, should we say because we don't want to point fingers, therefore people don't have the right to know?
So what do we do about that video in the wedding of Israelis, of Jews putting in guns?
There's a big difference between people going ahead on the videos and stabbing pictures of a baby, which is horrific, as opposed to an organization saying, wait a second, there are these organizations within Israel operating with foreign funding in order to subvert the democratic nature of the country. There's a big difference, and it's very, very important that people understand this.
They want us to get all together like jailers and inmates in a prison. That's the way we are all going to celebrate together within one compound.
We've got 40 seconds. I think that exemplifies the Israeli psyche and sadly the divisions within that we're still living daily, but it is the Christmas season. It belongs to the Goyim. We're going to wrap this one up. I want to thank you all for being here. When we get